Green, red, green? Wait, aren't dogs colorblind?
Super fly, super good, shoulda, coulda, knew I would. Super fly, super fresh, ask your mama, she's impressed.
Dogman. Step aside, Marvel and DC. There's a new comic company that's going to be taking over the big screen, since this is their second movie where they get to bring their creative pages to life. Welcome, everyone, to the Treehouse Comics Cinematic Universe, where even if this has more toilet humor than any other film franchise, at least it's less smelly than the Snyderverse.
It worked!
But seriously though, I mentioned before that back in my childhood, I was a fan of the works of author Dav Pilkey, specifically the Captain Underpants books. I'll admit that I did stop reading them after the 7th issue, The Big Bad Battle of the Bionic Booger Boy Part 2, The Revenge of the Ridiculous Robo-Boogers, but I'll always have fun memories of reading about the silly perils that George Beard and Harold Hutchins get into with their principal who becomes a weird superhero. But then, several years later in 2017, I got to relive that experience when DreamWorks Animation turned those books into Captain Underpants, the first epic movie. And as Principal Krupp said it best,
Considering they're completely implausible, juvenile, and filled with the lowest form of wit, potty humor, they're actually pretty funny.
I understand if this movie is not for everyone, especially when it can be a bit hyperactive and its childish tone is on another level, but it was a lot of fun to watch it, and I consider this to be a bit underrated. I'll even admit that if this were released back when I was a kid, it would have become one of my favorite movies. It's the kind of crazy film that I'd really get into. But fast forwarding to 2025, DreamWorks is taking another shot at adapting a Dav Pilkey novel with Dogman, and this time around, I'll be coming in pretty fresh. I've personally never read any of them, since they came out way after my time with the Pilkey books, and the most that I know about it is that it's based on the first comic that George and Harold created, at least according to the 9th Captain Underpants book, The Terrifying Return of Tippy Tinkletrousers. Seriously, I love how unhinged these titles are. So now that the city has a very unusual hero, can Dogman be as epic as Captain Underpants? Or does ACAB also apply to this officer? Let's find out. The story. It's important to keep in mind when going into this that it's the kind of movie that wants to capture the feeling that it's made for kids by kids. It helps to make sense of the direction that the movie took, as it is about a cop with a dog's head who's trying to stop his arch nemesis, an evil cat, from destroying the city, while his little clone grows a bond with the dog man.
You're the only one that can stop him, with all your kung fu skills and your canine fortitude or whatnot.
The reason why I told you to remember that is because the movie itself won't remind you, nor does it establish how this is from the mind of George and Harold who came up with the idea for one of their comics. It jumps straight into the action and wastes no time to putting a dog's head on a cop's body without looking into Dogman's origin story or much of his life before the operation.
What if we sew the dog's head onto the man's body?
Great idea and stuff!
Now, I'm not against the idea of making an animated film with the feel that it's for kids by kids. It's a cool concept that could go in a lot of fun directions. Not to mention that it could come with some great results like the Lego movies. However, in this case, that tone came with some flaws that does hinder itself as a feature. For one, there isn't really much of a story. At the most, the plot doesn't really start until little Petey comes in to give the film a purpose and to tie these characters together as they're kind of doing their own thing. And yet, while it may have an idea of what to do related to the little kid to supply the feature's heart, it's as if everything around it was unprepared and unsure of what to do with some of his cast, as they don't put in the effort to give them a strong purpose for the movie.
Petey escaped again.
Again?
Yeah, that's why I said again, yet again!
At best, instead of wanting to tell you a meaningful story, it primarily focuses on the comedy and play a lot with the materials it has in order to create a funny experience. To give this credit, I will say that it does do it well, and it is one of the better elements of the feature. I wouldn't say that it's a hilarious movie, but in general, the jokes are cute where some are related to its own silliness, but for the most part, they are dog-related with the protagonist's dog side getting the best of him. At best, they do help to give the film some charm as it's having fun by playing with its main character.
Cut it out. Stop it! Will you get out of here?
However, there is a part of me that feels like they could be better. This is another criticism that I have with its for kids by kids approach, and as weird as it may sound based on what I previously said, I also feel like it didn't make the most out of its tone. Yes, the film is self-aware of the kind of movie that it is, where it doesn't take itself seriously, yet at the same time, it doesn't take advantage of it to get fully creative with its concepts. If it took that direction, then its lack of story would have been forgiven because of how dedicated it would be to present everything it can do with a Dogman picture. If we look at the Captain Underpants movie, for example, the story itself may not be great, but the fun of that film comes from how unapologetically silly it is, and can sometimes think outside of the box to really play around with its tone to both enhance the comedy and add an element of surprise of what will it think of next. Dogman, on the other hand, doesn't take that extra step to be very playful. It could have some fun ideas, especially with Petey's inventions and during the climax, but it almost never wants to get crazy with them that could have helped this be more memorable. It doesn't offer a bad experience, but the movie is tamer than one may expect.
How evil can one cat be?
Pretty evil!
The story finds itself in an awkward middle. It's not greatly crafted, where the storytelling itself is what gets the viewer engaged, and it doesn't fully embrace the absurdity of its own concept. It is able to do some of the things okay so that it can be amusing at best, but I can't help but feel like there are many ways that it could have been a lot better. The animation. It's not the first time that DreamWorks took the pages of Dav Pilkey and brought them to life with animation, but this does go a little extra with the children's book style. To go back into how it is a for kids by kids type of movie, this is where the approach works the best, taking a style that is reminiscent to a child's drawing and bring them to life in a large 3D environment. And just about everything is crafted in a way as if it were from the perspective of a kid. From the large buildings all around OK City, to the small details that the Chief and Petey had to work with in their respective places. It gives the movie this juvenile lens where the visuals alone are capable to establish what the movie's tone will be. It also helps when the color palette is basic, but in a good way, often keeping itself limited for each of the characters and the rooms they're in to make them distinct and easily recognizable, like the blue and gold of the Chief and Dogman, and the orange and black stripes of Petey and his little clone.
And if somebody just happens to have an Eastern gray squirrel, you look at the monitor!
Of course, with the Dav Pilkey designs, it's easy to compare the look to the Captain Underpants movie, and I don't deny that the resemblances are there. However, I feel like there's another animated film in which its style reminds me more, and that's the Peanuts movie. Not because of how the characters are drawn the same, I mean, there is a distinct difference, but rather due to its stylistic approach. I feel like the Peanuts movie doesn't get enough credit for the innovation of how it stylized computer animation, where many often contribute that to the Spider-Verse films. Instead of just making a typical 3D version of the Peanuts comics, it completely updated the medium to maintain the recognizable 2D look and changed the physics of their movements with lesser frames that reflect how they were in the past, like in the comics and the animated specials, resulting in a 2D movie that has 3D textures. A lot of that is also found in Dogman, where the design's main goal is to stay true to how they look in the books with that kid-like approach that is primarily made for 2D, but they also have additional textures not just to enrich their look, but also emphasize that childlike approach where their details look like they were drawn with markers or crayon, or they're glued on like a scrapbook.
This super cop made friends, solves crimes, and even plays piano for the old folks.
At the same time, the effects also apply this logic to enhance the style, playing with words that pop up and sometimes be used as gags for the characters, and give lines a critical role on the action, rather they be on the quick movements or on the elements. And yet, there is a catch that I find that it doesn't match up with the Blue Sky film. Again, the one criticism that I have with the animation is that it doesn't go all out with its style. It's as if the look is in between the Peanuts movie and Captain Underpants, as it tries to go for that 2D approach, but doesn't go enough where this is still a 3D movie. A lot of how the shots go around with the cinematography and the way the characters move still function like a typical family-friendly computer animated feature. It feels less like a fully stylized film and more like animation that has a special filter over it. It's still impressive to watch with the dedication of a world that looks like it was crafted by a kid, but again, it could have done more to take its style to amaze audiences.
If you make a mistake, hit the undo button.
Sold separately. Sold separately? No!
But as a movie starring a cop with a dog's head chasing an evil cat, one would expect that some action is involved, right? Of course, you will find some of that, but don't expect anything intense here. They lean more on the comedic side so that it can be goofy with its creativity. Sure, it doesn't make it very engaging where it doesn't want to scare the young viewers, but they could still be fun in their own right. Especially at the climax where they make the scale as big as the city where they have to battle with the new enemies that were created by the living spray. So what they lack in intensity, they make up for it with amusing humor. At best, this is a nice looking animated film. Sure, it could have shown more of the animation's capabilities, and there are other movies whose style can easily overshadow this one, but it was able to do what it wanted to achieve, and what it did is pleasant to look at. This is the one time where I could say that the movie looks like it was animated by a child, and mean that as a good thing. The characters. As a movie that doesn't take itself seriously and mainly wants to amuse the kids, it doesn't spend time to make their characters deep. At best, they're cliched archetypes, but are self-aware of that and try to have fun with it, as they fully embrace it instead of trying to prove that they can be more than their label. It's not as effective, but the one plus side is that there are no terribly crafted characters either. Some could supply at least one thing to give this film a bit of charm. A good example of what I mean is Dogman himself. As a character, he's pretty much what his name implies, a human cop with a dog's head. Don't expect to learn about his life prior or how this weird fusion affected him personally because that just gets quickly glanced over. At the most, it mentioned how he was once two separate entities as Officer Knight and his dog Greg, and there were some sacrifices that came with the accident that resulted in the operation, like losing his girlfriend, but they're just to quickly establish how we have a dog man in this film. Then again, his dog-like behavior is what makes the film fun to watch. As he tries to fight crime and catch Petey, his dog side can't help but get distracted by things like balls and squirrels, which result in many of the movie's funny moments. But even as a dog, he does have allies who help him out, including Sarah, the news reporter always wanting to catch the big story, but is also Dogman's friend, and the Chief, Dog's angry boss who wants to make sure that Petey stays behind bars. On a side note, I'd argue that his voice, Lil Rel Howery, is the one who understood the movie's assignment the best. He delivered a great performance that's not afraid to be over the top, but could also show his heart to prove that he does care about the people and not just his job. While his character is the generic chief of police, his performance makes him the rare element of the movie that can deliver the right amount of comedy and soul without feeling like the movie could have given us more.
Why do you always gotta lick the inside of my mouth?
As for the villains, there's Flippy the Fish, whose part only happens in the third act to make the film more surrealistic, but his personality is just the usual Ricky Gervais bad guy, and Petey, Dogman's arch nemesis who's all about being evil. There is a part of me that wants to write him off as a generic antagonist, but I was surprised to find that Pete Davidson also gave a strong performance. I do prefer Howery a little more, but Davidson also did great on playing up the villainy, while also showing another side of the character where his evilness is challenged by kindness. Again, there's not much to Petey himself, but Davidson made his emotions show that he is genuinely more than a villain.
Enough about this dog man. It's time to stop this super cop. He's not going to ruin my evil plans to destroy all do-gooders.
And then there's the cat's clone, Little Petey. For the most part, he's the movie's MacGuffin who carries the heart of the picture. He plays an important role to both Dogman and Petey as he presents the film's message of how, even in a problematic world, there is still some good that's worth fighting for. However, as a character, Little Petey is the least interesting because his personality stays monotone where all he does is act cute.
Do you even know what I'm saying?
No, but it sounds fun. I want to be miserable too.
Good, that's the spirit.
On their own, the characters are flat and they don't do more than the trope or the concept that they're assigned with. However, there are some who do get help from either the voice acting or the comedy to make their moments enjoyable. The characters won't be easy to remember after the movie is finished, but when they are on, they can be, at most, fun to watch. Like the crime-fighting Fusion himself, this is exactly what you'd expect from an animated film about a cop with a dog for a head. Dogman is an animated kids movie that knows exactly what it is and doesn't pursue to be anything more than that. There are some good things that can be found in this feature, like the comedy is cute, the animation is stylistically nice, and some of the voice acting is solid, but it holds itself back where its stronger assets can only be good and not great. The rest that comes from the writing and the directing, like the story and the characters themselves, don't offer much substance and result in the film to feel mostly generic. It's not an awful movie at all. I'd even say that it's hard to find anything that is legitimately bad here. But at worst, Dogman can be an easily forgettable picture where you could get a lot more out of this kind of experience from either the Lego movies or Captain Underpants. However, as it is a kids movie, that's who I recommend this to the most. For kids who want a fun time when watching a movie, this is a safe bet to give them something that they can enjoy. For everyone else who is older, I think it's maybe worth trying at least once to see if you might like this one more than I do. But on the other hand, I don't think you'll miss much if you pass on this. By the way, there is also an animated short that is shown before Dogman called The Bad Guys, Little Lies and Alibis, which is obviously meant to prepare audiences for the bad guys too. Because this is a short promo for the sequel, I think all the excitement of the bad guys feels very condensed and not as strong as the first film. But like Dogman, at best, it serves its purpose and it's cute to see all the crazy shenanigans that the gang gets into just to not be late. And if you enjoyed my kind of shenanigans with this review, then give this a like and subscribe to my channel. You can also support me on my Patreon so that you can be a part of my bad guy style crazy gang. But back to the dog who stops the bad guys, there are many others, including from DreamWorks, who are more reliable, but at the very least, Dogman can get the job done.
Life's not fair.
What?
Life's not fair.